All right, so we're diving into the Crusades, but not the usual good guys versus bad guys story you often hear.
Yeah, it's way more complicated than that.
We're going deep, folks, using Thomas Asbridge's book, The Crusades, the authoritative history of the war for the Holy Land. It's packed with details, the kind that make you go, whoa, never knew that.
Definitely. People forget this era wasn't just about religion. It was about faith. Yeah, but also power struggles and even some, well, opportunism.
Opportunism.
Yeah, like take Fulk Nerra, Count of Anjou, a real piece of work, this guy.
Oh yeah, Fulk Nerra. Sounds like he walked straight out of Game of Thrones.
Right. Asbridge doesn't hold back.
Right.
Burning his wife at the stake, that kind of ruthlessness.
Whoa, intense. But then he goes on these pilgrimages to Jerusalem multiple times. It's like he's trying to balance out the bad karma or something.
It shows you just how important Jerusalem was to medieval Christians. Spiritually, I mean, that city was everything to them.
Even put at the center of their world, literally.
Exactly.
Like all those old maps, Jerusalem's this huge, important-looking place. Bigger than it really was.
Symbolically, it had to be. For them, it was the heart of their world. It wasn't just land they wanted to conquer. It was their spiritual inheritance. That's how they saw it.
Powerful stuff. Okay, so we have this deep religious devotion. But then there's the whole knighthood thing. We picture these noble warriors always ready to fight. But was that really how it worked? What was knighthood actually like back then?
The knight in shining armor, always ready for battle. Kind of a romanticized idea. The papacy, when they called for the First Crusade, they were hoping to rally these knights, but these guys were more like, well, landowners, farmers even, who fought part-time.
Warrior aristocrats, not exactly soldiers by trade.
Exactly.
Imagine that. One day you're tending crops, the next you're marching off to war in a strange land. Must have been a shock to the system.
For sure. And it wasn't just religious duty that motivated them. Land, money, social status. It was a mix.
History's never simple, is it? So while Europe's got this religious fervor going on, what's happening over in the Middle East? The Seljuk Turks, right?
Yeah, yes, the Seljuks. By the 11th century, they were a force to be reckoned with. They changed everything in the Middle East. Their expansion, it was a direct threat to the Byzantines, who controlled most of what's now Turkey. And that meant trouble for Christian pilgrims trying to reach Jerusalem.
But here's a twist. Right when the First Crusade kicks off, the Seljuk Empire was actually pretty unstable. They just lost their Sultan, Malik Shah, led to a bunch of internal power struggles.
A power vacuum.
Exactly. A perfect opportunity, at least from the Crusaders' perspective.
You know, it's strange to think if the Crusade had happened a few years earlier or even later, the outcome could have been completely different.
Timing is everything. So we have these two forces on a collision course. European Christendom, driven by faith and a desire to reclaim what they saw as theirs, and this fractured Seljuk Empire dealing with its own problems. To really get this, though, we need to understand the ideas at play here. Jihad on one side, and the Christian idea of a just war on the other. Okay, so jihad versus just war. Two sides of the same coin, or completely different ideas.
Worlds apart, really. Today, jihad, it's a loaded term. But back then, it was rooted in this idea of Dar al-Harb, the house of war. Basically, any land not under Islamic rule.
So there was a duty to expand, bring more people under Islam.
You could say that,
Yeah.
but here's the thing. By the 11th century, that whole expansionist drive had lost a lot of steam.
Really?
Yeah. The Muslim world, especially the Seljuks, they were dealing with their own internal divisions by then. Theological debates, power struggles. It was more about holding on to what they had than conquering new lands.
So not exactly itching for a fight with Christendom.
Not at that moment, no. Meanwhile, in Europe, you have this idea of a just war gaining traction. It'd been around, but this is when it starts to really matter.
And a just war, that means.
Specific conditions had to be met. Self-defense, protecting the innocent, reclaiming what was wrongfully taken, that sort of thing. It gave them a moral framework for fighting.
Fascinating. Two totally different ways of looking at warfare, about to collide head-on. One side's expansionist zeal has cooled down, the other's just heating up. But let's talk about the people involved, not just the ideas. We've talked about the knights, but who were the big names leading the First Crusade?
Oh, it wasn't just a faceless army. You had some real characters. Ambitious, often at odds with each other.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Take Godfrey of Bouillon, for one. A Frankish nobleman became a central figure in the whole thing.
Godfrey of Bouillon. Got it. Who else?
Raymond V of Toulouse. Loaded, powerful, saw the crusade as a way to expand his own influence.
Opportunism rearing its head again.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And then there's Bohemond of Toronto, a Norman adventurer. He wanted to carve out his own little kingdom in the east.
Sounds like a recipe for both victory and disaster. All those big personalities, each with their own agenda. So what was their first big challenge? The siege of Nicaea, right?
Nicaea was key. Controlled important trade routes, and it was heavily fortified. A real obstacle.
Asbridge really makes you feel it, the scale of the place, those walls, towers. It's like something out of a movie. How do you even begin to attack something like that?
Alliances were key. The Crusaders teamed up with the Byzantine Emperor, Alexius VI Comnenus.
Smart move.
The Byzantines didn't fight directly, but they provided support, helped cut off supply lines to the city. Plus, they secretly negotiated with Nicaea to surrender.
Wow, talk about a double cross. So it wasn't just brute strength, it was strategy and some clever maneuvering.
Exactly.
But Nicaea was just the beginning. Next came the Seljuk Turks at Dorylaeum. Open battle this time.
Dorylaeum, that was a close one. The Crusaders were caught completely by surprise, almost a disaster.
Asbridge describes the panic, the chaos, waves of Turkish horsemen, arrows raining down. Must have been terrifying.
It was brutal, heavy casualties on both sides. But somehow, the Crusaders managed to regroup. Their heavy infantry held the line, and eventually the Seljuks just broke. They had to withdraw.
Talk about snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. But their trials weren't over yet. After Dorylaeum came the really hard part, the siege of Antioch. 8 months.
Antioch was a turning point. But not in a good way, at least not at first. The Crusaders, they had this swift victory at Nicaea. Morale was high. Antioch, though, that was different.
What made it so tough? Stronger defenses.
Antioch was heavily fortified, sure, but the real challenge was the sheer time it took. Months dragged on, disease spread through the ranks, they were running out of food. They must have wondered if God had abandoned them.
Asbridge doesn't hold back on the grim details. People eating anything they could find, even rats. Desperation sinking in.
It was a dark time. And just when it seemed like all hope was lost, something incredible happened.
This is where it gets kind of hard to believe. They found the Holy Lance. The actual spear that pierced Jesus' side. Come on, that's got to be too good to be true.
Sounds far-fetched to us, right?
Okay.
But you have to remember what these relics meant to people back then. Not just historical objects. They were imbued with spiritual power. Whether it was authentic or not, that's almost beside the point.
Yeah.
Finding the Holy Lance, it was like a sign from God. Gave them hope when they desperately needed it.
A massive morale boost. But did they actually use it in battle? Charge into Antioch waving it around?
Not exactly a Holy Grail movie, haha. But the impact was definitely there. Bowman of Taranto, he sees this as a sign, uses it to rally the troops. They launch the surprise attack, totally catch the Muslims off guard, and boom, Antioch is theirs.
From near defeat to total victory. Faith and a bit of good timing, huh? Antioch falls, the road to Jerusalem is open. What's going through their minds as they approach the holy city?
Jerusalem in the 11th century, it wasn't just a city. To Christians, it was where Jesus was crucified, resurrected, the holiest of holy places. And for Muslims, this was Al-Quds, the noble sanctuary, home to the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, their third holiest site. You can't overstate the importance of this place for both sides.
And yet, even a city as important as Jerusalem had to be taken by force. Asbridge doesn't shy away from the brutal reality of the siege. What was it like?
Imagine months of hardship, of unwavering faith, of marching and fighting, all leading to this moment. They reach Jerusalem, ready to claim their prize, and they're met with fierce resistance. Not just walls and soldiers, but the will of the defenders.
Asbridge talks about siege towers, catapults, tunnels dug under the walls. It's almost unimaginable.
It was brutal. And it wasn't just about physical force. Psychological warfare played a part too. The defenders would desecrate Christian symbols right in front of the Crusaders, trying to break their spirit. And the Crusaders retaliated with their own horrors, executions, that sort of thing. A vicious cycle.
And then, after weeks of fighting, it happened. Jerusalem, this impenetrable city, falls. And what follows, well, Asbridge doesn't sugarcoat it.
It was a massacre. The Crusaders, after everything they'd been through, they weren't in a forgiving mood. Thousands were slaughtered, men, women, children. Doesn't matter what faith they followed, it's a dark side to the story, a reminder that victory often comes at a terrible price, even if they believed it was God's will.
A moment of triumph, but stained with blood. The capture of Jerusalem changed everything, but not in a simple way. What were the lasting effects of this First Crusade?
The First Crusade, as brutal as it was, it really reshaped the relationship between Europe and the Middle East. Crusader states were established, these little pockets of Christendom holding out in a Muslim world. Trade routes opened up too. Ideas, goods, even architectural styles started flowing back and forth, a real cultural exchange.
It's strange how something so violent could lead to something like that, isn't it? Goes to show history is rarely straightforward.
Exactly. And we see the echoes of that exchange even now. Art, architecture, even the food we eat. The Crusades were a time of upheaval, no doubt. But they left their mark in ways people don't even realize.
A complex legacy, that's for sure. One that we're still grappling with today. Expert, this has been eye-opening. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive into the First Crusade. It's a story that needs to be told and understood with all its complexities.
My pleasure. But it's just the tip of the iceberg. The Crusades went on for centuries, so many different perspectives, so many stories within the larger story. Keep digging, keep asking questions. It's the only way to really understand the past.
To everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on the Crusades. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time as we delve into another fascinating chapter of history.